Hey, greatness, it's me, Sister Mathina, and thank you for coming back to this conversation. I wanted to lift this conversation because we often talk about sisterhood as a place to heal. And we sometimes talk about what happens after there's even been hurt in sisterhood. Today's conversation is about sisterhood elevation. The sisterhood that every leader needs is one that can hold joy and celebration and ease, not just recovery. And while all of those pieces are so true, it's critical to lean into the fact that trust and truth and tenderness are not just soft concepts, which is what they can be treated as at sometimes. Rather, they are structural conditions that allow joy to live in leadership spaces. And without those things, without those three things in particular, then there is no true way back from brokenness. And we have to find our way back to celebrating the joy. And let me ask you this question, because the first time I saw this, I said, wait a minute. Okay, and I don't even say, okay. Let me ask you this question. Where have you experienced sisterhood joy that didn't require you to be broken first? Where have you experienced sisterhood joy that didn't require you to be broken first? Many of us associate sisterhood with healing because that's where we first were held. But joy in sisterhood often predates pain. There is joy there first. And early sisterhood memories can be joyful and light and unburdened. When I think about my earliest when I think about memories of joy and joy before brokenness, it does actually require me to go back to those first places and my first sisters. And for me, those are my cousins. So I have a sister who is a biological sister who is 2.5 years younger than me. But I have cousins who are not quite as, like, maybe a year and a half, right? So right there. And when I think about them, immediate joy, immediate happiness, lightness. When I reflect on them, my joy in those spaces, particularly, those earlier memories and spaces, that joy didn't require explanation. It didn't require healing language. It didn't require recovery from anything. That memory is not accidental. It reveals what sisterhood can be when it's not organized around crisis. And I wanted to lift this conversation because while I know there's so much healing that needs to happen, that healing doesn't happen without joy. And you can have sisterhood without the trauma and without needing that, right? There are a few conditions, and that's where I believe the trust and the truth and the tenderness does come into play, because trust, it can make the safety possible for joy. Trust is what allows joy to show up without armor. And trust means you don't have to perform, explain, or defend. Rather, it's built through consistency, discretion, and emotional steadiness. That's where trust really shows up. When you think about safe spaces that you trust, that's when you're thinking about, eating and laughing together, no judgment. That's when you're thinking about curating that joy together, inside jokes, right? And in joyful, safe sisterhood, correction is handled with love. So for those of us who lead in spaces, you as a leader don't just hold pain. You curate environments where ease and enjoyment are truly allowed. So accessing that joy is critical. So that's trust. The next thing I want to talk about is truth. And truth that allows us to recognize with honesty that honesty doesn't cost belonging, or at least it shouldn't. Honesty shouldn't cost you belonging. Truth in sisterhood is not just confession and let me lay it all out there. Truth is being able to say where you are without being managed and corrected. Joy shows up when truth doesn't require self-censorship in a way that you don't even recognize yourself any longer. So instead of correction and you're wrong and somebody who feels the need to tell you you're wrong all the time, you're not going to be able to center joy in a space like that. Instead, perhaps there's more curiosity than just leaning straight into correction, right? Where your honesty is allowed without you having to perform for folks. And so for those of us who are sitting in leadership spaces, when we as leaders allow truth to land, sometimes we have to do it without commentary, without telling somebody more. Just let it land. Let that honesty become breathable. When we allow for that in our spaces that we curate, that activates the gateway of tenderness. Because tenderness is the right now gateway that allows trust and truth to coexist. It's not weakness. It rather, tenderness is attunement to what's needed in a space to allow people to breathe and live. I want us to activate tenderness as an avenue, a gateway for those in our community to be held without being fixed, right? We're going to create these containers where all of it can exist and we can journey through and to the joy and the highest levels of ourselves as the individuals in the community, not just the leaders. And when I think about that concept of joy, when I think about how tenderness makes room for joy without rushing it, that's where I think about those safe spaces for joy and leadership. And I think one of those, and y'all tell me, right? Drop this in the comments. Let me know if y'all are leaning into this concept with me, that sisterhood is a place to hold and curate joy. And in order for that to happen, you have to be willing to model joy. As a leader, you have to be willing to model it and protect it, not just wait for it to happen, right? We have to be intentional about how we create it, because joy isn't going to happen by accident. Often, because we've journeyed through so many other things, by the time we get to, I won't say this big old age, I'm just saying by the time we get here, then we have to curate spaces where joy has permission to exist. It's visible and it's in a space where it's safe. So because we often have to create that does lean into an opportunity for us to create structure. Because many leaders who experience the need to curate joy, one of the things we have to walk through is that we weren't intentionally withholding joy, but many of us, we were never taught that joy is leadership. So those leaders who withhold joy, it's not because you don't access it, don't want to center it, but rather you weren't necessarily taught that joy is in fact leadership. And that becomes a new framing by which to move through sisterhood and spaces that you curate as a leader. whether it's in your profession, in a community you're building, in your spiritual community, in your sorority community. Joy has to be treated as essential, not just indulgent. Right? And if that is the case, then we become anchored and aligned to seeing joy as not the opposite of responsibility, but as part of leadership stewardship. Ships, and you know what ships take you. They take you places. So joy can actually take us places. And to be honest, joy can deepen connection far faster than trauma. But when we have reconditioned ourselves to seek alignment through that trauma bonding, then joy has no room to thrive and to grow and to live. Because joy can deepen trust through play, curiosity, shared experiences. And too often we put trauma in that place once we've experienced it. What would it look like for you to center joy as the bonding agent? It doesn't mean you don't recognize that pain or trauma or hurt can show up. It means that we're journeying back to joy in as many ways as possible. And for example, I want you to write this in the comments as you think about your answer to this. What are some of the things that you actively do to center and lift joy? What does it look like? One of the ways I know I seek to center joy, particularly in community and in sisterhood, is finding ways for us to do something new together that allows us to connect without judgment. And so, for example, not that y'all have to do this by any means, but one of my favorite things to do with a group of my sister friends, we've been friends for well over 20 years at this point, is we do these escape rooms together. And we do these 36-hour weekends where we leave the children, we leave our partners, and for 36 hours, it's just me and the girls, and we find something new to do together or something fun that we can do together to continue to deepen the connection that started out of curiosity, that started with openness, that started with learning how to build sisterhood and connection as a group of girls at the Morgan State University. That came from literally different, not only just different cities, but different states, okay? And so doing something new together without judgment can quickly build connection and quickly curate an opportunity for you to lift laughter. Laughter, learning, all of it creates lightness and a level of emotional security that shows up when you use curiosity to lean into joy, and it becomes part of the journey. Sometimes joy builds trust faster than trauma because it reminds us of who we are when we're not defending ourselves. And it's the concepts. So, hold on. Nice product placement. No, seriously. We named this Come Sit With Us because I remember from my group of college friends, and my sister who did this, she just brought up the day. She was like, "Man, that was that was a good decision." I'm like, "Yes, it changed my life." And you may have heard me share this before. We were our first year of college. We were strangers. I was standing in a line getting ready to get some food, and someone tapped me on my shoulder and was like, "You seem nice. Can I sit with you?" And completely changed the rest of my life. And we're still friends to this day. And as I was thinking about and talking to women who are steeped in their careers and have built family life, but recognize that sometimes their friendships have either been lost or have gone to the wayside. And it's really hard to make friends as an adult, especially if you may not have deep connections with the folks you went to college with, or you may not have childhood friends that you're still connected to. And so me and my sisters have talked about this, that there is a level of effort that needs to be put in order to, make friends as an adult, because your third place is, or your third space is usually now work. And if you don't connect in that, then where do you find folks? Anyway, point is, as I thought about curating space for women to come together again, that conversation that changed my life with my sister friend is what came to mind, and how my daughter at a very early age would walk up to people and say her name and, do you want to play? And I just kept asking myself, what is the adult version of that? And the language of come sit with us, or come sit with me, or can I sit with you, is what came up. So you never know how your invitation to connect with someone can change the entire trajectory of their life. And to say, come sit with us, is an invitation into safety, into presence, and a shared joy. That's the goal. So much so that one of the categories in the Gather and Glow deck is about joy, and about centering that joy and activating it again. Because I deeply believe that if we want to experience joy, especially as we mature, then we have to give it a bit of structure and intention. And the game does that. You don't need the game, but feel free to grab your own copy. But you need to find ways that you're going to make that happen in your own life, where you can center belonging, where you can activate conversations, where joy is designed and not just rushed. And so for those of us who are leaders, I want you to think about that in the spaces that you build. How do you let joy breathe when you see it? How do you model it? How do you let that moment of laughter live in spaces that you're building? And it doesn't matter the topic. It matters the culture that you're creating that will allow that to live and breathe. And so I want to close. I know I'm getting to that point. My goal is to try and keep these under 20 minutes, but And so here's my question I would love for you to reflect on. I know I already gave you a few others today, but write it down, come back. Let's do the work. What would it look like to lead with joy on purpose? What would it look like to lead with joy on purpose? What would that look like for you in the spaces that you curate? How does that show up? How does it live? How does it breathe? I believe that sisterhood is not only where we heal, it's where we celebrate being alive together. And leaders have the power to make that joy visible, repeatable, and safe. And I so look forward to the ways in which you do that. Be sure to go to our website, nisanova.com, to learn more about our upcoming events, programs, activities, and let us know how these conversations are serving and supporting you. I love you to pieces, and back whole again. Take care.